Welcome to the Lady Landlords podcast, where we empower women to gain financial independence through real estate investing. I'm your host, Becky Nova, founder of Lady Landlords. If you're ready to buy, manage, and grow your real estate portfolio, then let's get started.
Over the past few weeks, I have been able to share in our Lady Landlords community about my Independence Day, the day that I was able to leave corporate America and move to full-time real estate. Now, I have loved being able to share that episode, and I really got a great reception from women asking me a ton of questions about how I left, when I knew it was time to leave, when I knew it was time to leave, and everything that really surrounds that big decision of leaving corporate America to become a full-time real estate investor. And that is what I want to address today. So if you have ever dreamed of leaving your day job, I hope this episode helps give you some clarity on what that looks like and some just information that you might not be thinking about, because these are all the things that I wish somebody had actually told me. And this is really not supposed to be a highlight reel. I really just want to point out the reality and the full picture of what that looks like. My goal today is not to convince you that you need to leave your day job and become a full-time real estate investor. That is an absolute personal decision that I would never tell anybody that they need to do that. What I think is really cool about real estate investing as a whole is that this gets to fit into our lives however we determine that looks. Most of the women that I talk to in Lady Landlords are not looking to fully retire. What they're looking for is freedom, choices, options to decide what that will look like. Maybe that does include leaving your full-time day job. Maybe that means having to leave that day job tomorrow or yesterday. Or sometimes that's saying, hey, I want to retire in 10 years in, for example, my 50s, rather than waiting until I'm 65, or these days looking at retirement ages of 70 plus probably. So really what I want to do today is just share what that picture kind of looks like and just talk about the reality of what it is to become that full-time investor and to leave that day job. So for me, I worked within cancer research for about 15 years. Okay. My kind of day-to-day was a very structured schedule. What was interesting is I worked up until the pandemic, I worked in an office. In cancer research, I worked mostly in hospitals for many years. And then I moved to working on the pharmaceutical side of the research. So let's talk a little bit about kind of the differences there. When I was working in an office, I had that commute. I was living right outside of New York City. Many years I lived in New York City, but when I started buying real estate, moved outside of New York City. But where I was living outside of New York City, I had that daily commute that had to go into the city. I had a very structured schedule. I remember every day I ate the exact same breakfast. I would get to my desk, walk to the kitchen, make my breakfast, right? I remember having that debate kind of with my coworkers and my boss about, for my commute, I had train times, right? I took a commuter train into New York City every single day, and the train times were like every 30 minutes. So I would either get to my office like 30 minutes early or like 4 minutes late. And I remember being like, I'm just going to be late every single day. There's no way on a salaried employee where I don't make overtime, I was like, I'm not coming in 30 minutes early. What was interesting though, is I had to do the same thing at the end of the day. For me to get home, and the way that commuter trains worked back to where I was living, it was the same thing that I either had to leave my office like 10 minutes before my day technically ended, or I would be stuck there for like another like 45 minutes after the end of like my day. And I was like, there's no way I'm doing that as a salaried employee. I'm not getting paid overtime. No way I'm leaving this place 10 minutes early. But it was just so interesting that, I had to get there. And I remember my boss being like, oh, well, you're 4 minutes late every day, you're clocking in. And I just remember being like, this is so stupid. I still get to the office and then I go to the kitchen. Everybody's making coffee. I'm making my breakfast. Fun fact about me, I do not drink coffee, and neither does my husband. So if for some reason you ever come to my home and stay over, good luck in the morning, because there is no coffee or no coffee pot in the household. But I just remember being like, why is this such a stupid logistic that I have to be here in this building by 8:30 a.m. when I just go and stand in the kitchen for the first 20 minutes anyways. There were other people in the office. They would come in, drop their bag. They would be there 8:29, so they're on the good side of my boss. And they would throw their bag down and then go back out of the building and go stand online at a deli or go to a Starbucks to then go get their breakfast or their coffee. And I'm like, how make it make sense? Like, how is that okay that they got here on time early, but then are gone for an hour? When meanwhile, like I got here 4 minutes late, but I'm actually at my desk. So that was where a lot of that like hypocrisy in a corporate office always kind of bothered me because it was like these structures and these rules, but for like no reason whatsoever. I remember years ago, a hospital I worked at earlier on in my career in cancer research. Back in the day, we used to have pagers. And if there was something that was going on with our patient or some type of issue, even if I was off work, I would still get paged. And I remember one weekend, I got paged like Saturday night, like real in the middle of the night. And luckily, I only lived a couple blocks from the hospital because my pager needed to work. And I remember going and I was in the hospital like all day Saturday, then all day Sunday. I think finally, like I slept at the hospital before then I clock in, doing air quotes over here if you're not watching me on YouTube. You know, I had to clock in Monday morning at like 9 a.m. And I remember my boss like scheduling a meeting with me that morning and being like, hey, you weren't at your desk until like 9:30. And I'm like, yeah, I was exhausted. I've been here for like 48 hours. I have not slept in days. And I remember her just being so like upset with me. And I think I got like written up where she was like, well, your workday starts at 9, so you need to be at your desk because your staff, I was a manager at this time. She was like, oh, well, your staff needs to see that you're here. And I'm like, lady, I've been here for 48 hours. Like that little bit of time there, what we should really be showing and promoting is getting the work done, not just an arbitrary time of sitting at a desk. And for me, that was something that always made me feel like corporate America wasn't really going to fit with me because of these just ridiculous, what I found rules that made no sense. But I would do my work in the morning. I was always a person that would go and do like gym time during my lunch hour and my lunch break and go do that. And then I'd finish up my day. My last job in an actual hospital, I remember trying to see if I could go the entire day without talking to anybody, because sometimes I just didn't want to be stuck in just the coworker drama. I didn't care who was dating who. I just want to be there, get my work done. And one of the things that always bothered me the most was those useless meetings. Just getting people together, trying to coordinate everybody, and really just having an hour-long conversation of something that could have been like a 2-sentence email. That never worked for me. I remember I had something that I used to call my chair sweater. My chair sweater was that sweater that you had to have on a chair that because everything was always freezing in these offices. And I felt like no matter how cute my outfit got to be, I was always so cold that it didn't matter. And I always had this oversized bundled sweater. And every time I'd go to a meeting, it was like, okay, need a notebook, need my pen, need my chair sweater. And if you're watching me on YouTube, look, my chair, no sweater. It was something that just there was that such like that regular daily like just schedule to it. I liked my coworkers most of the time. Different jobs, you know, had different kind of places that I felt like I was able to connect with other people. After the pandemic, I switched over to really working on the pharmaceutical side, and I got to work from home a lot more. So much more freedom in that. It was interesting. There was just less oversight. I felt like a lot of those arbitrary rules kind of disappeared. And I felt like a lot of the roles that I was in, and it might have just been the job that I had at that time when I switched, that I felt like I was more challenged to just do my work on my own schedule, but get it done and don't be late, rather than kind of feel like I was being babysat like all the time as an adult. I think that might have just been company culture, but I got to be honest, the later companies that I worked for, I did enjoy. I probably worked at my last pharmaceutical company for probably longer than I needed to with income that was coming in from real estate. But to be honest, I enjoyed it. It didn't bother me. It felt like it kind of complemented my life. And that was really because I was in a place where I had a lot of control on my schedule. Like I said, by this time I was really in management. So the only person that I could not say no to a meeting with was my boss, who I met with once every other week, and that was fine. But I felt like I was able to work my life around it a little bit. If I needed to go to a dentist appointment, if there was a gym class that I wanted to take that made it where I got back to my desk a little bit later than I was supposed to, those things were okay as long as I was able to do my work and do my work on time and do it well. And that honestly, I would have continued staying there even though I had already replaced my income with real estate investing. I had no problem actually staying there. I enjoyed that. And that's why I encourage you to think about, is this something that you need to leave day job, or how can you really make that work? And also there is a possibility, I've seen other people say, well, hey, now that I have the real estate money coming in, I can switch to a role where I might be making less money, but I might have a better quality of life. So I think those are the pieces that are really kind of nice. One of the biggest differences that I see is I do feel when I worked in a 9 to 5, I clearly had that security. I had that predictable paycheck. I knew how much money I was going to be making. I worked for large organizations, so, really was not in a place where I wasn't worried about getting paid in the same way that I don't always know if I'm going to get my rent money from tenants that month. So there was definitely a lot more security in it, and clearly benefits were covered. I see in Lady Landlords, one of the biggest topics talked about when going full time is, what do people do for medical insurance? And I'll address that in a few minutes, but I feel like those are a lot of things that kind of keep us tied to those 9 to 5. So what it's interesting is I've always felt that real estate investing really should be supplementing what our life looks like. So it's okay to still stay at your 9 to 5. We don't have to leave it. It's just interesting to decide what works for us and what doesn't. And to be honest, when you have money, problems don't seem as bad. You have a lot more options and ways to navigate things. There were jobs that I was able to leave. That last hospital job I was telling you about, my boss just decided one day she did not like me anymore, and she was going to make my life a living hell, and I was not going to stay there. My coworkers had worked there for years, and they were like, oh yeah, once she doesn't like you, that's it. And I'm like, well, why are you still here if she's treating you this horribly? Year after year, you're saying. And they were like, well, we don't have any other place to go right now. And that just made me so sad. I was like, I'm not going to stay in a place where I'm going to be treated poorly. That's ridiculous. I understand the stability. I understand that bills need to be paid, but luckily I had money coming in from somewhere else that I would say, I'm not going to take this. And I was really happy to write that letter of resignation, let me tell you. Also, then when I had moved into, and I shared this when I talked about my Independence Day, go back a couple episodes if you want to hear about that from early July. But I was really happy when my company was doing layoffs to be the one to say, I'll take the layoff. I'll take the severance package. But I was really happy just because I knew a lot of my coworkers were in a position where they couldn't go without that income coming in. That meant a difference of what was going to happen with their house and their kids. And I didn't want them to be impacted, and I was fine. And that's all really kind of thanks to real estate. So I guess I'll ask you a quick question here. Like, I want you to think about, have you ever been grateful for a job that you had? It's still known it wasn't the life that you necessarily wanted forever. And that's an okay spot. So give me a why down in the comments here if you have ever been grateful for a job, but still know that it's not the place you plan on being for the rest of your life. I know I'm not alone on that. So what kind of changed for me, I gotta be honest, was probably around that time of the pandemic. At that point in time, I was still working at that hospital down in Manhattan. And I had this boss for like a few months that she and I were so close. We were good friends. And then it was actually all over a Halloween party that she was upset that we were going to do like a collective costume. And it was from that point on that she was upset that I was working with my team and doing a costume party and didn't side with her. And that was it. She just would do anything she could do to just annoy me and poke me there. One of the things actually she did was she added me to more meetings. Remember, I told you my goal was to not go to useless meetings. She would make me go to these meetings and just wasted my time of my day. So then I couldn't do the work I actually had to do because I was in just useless meetings that had nothing to do with me. The second thing that she did, and I will never forget this because I found this email when I moved into my new home last summer. It was an email chain that I printed out from that job where she declined my PTO request. I had the time, I had the coverage, I had the bankable hours, and she chose just to say no. And I thought that was crazy that somebody else could dictate how I got to use my time and time that I earned, time that I had worked for no valid reason whatsoever, and purely because she did not like me. Craziness. It was that time, that was around early 2020, that all of that was happening. And it was at that point then, March 2020, I'll never forget the day that my husband came home and said that he lost his job, that his job had to close due to the pandemic, and asked me, what are we going to do now down an income stream? And it was at that moment that, just kind of looking at numbers and kind of tracking what we were doing in our rentals, that I kind of said to him, I'm like, we don't really need your job. And he was like, what are you talking about? And I'm like, we've already replaced your income with real estate. Like, we'll be fine. I said to him that what I thought we should do was actually buy more real estate. And I remember he just kind of like looked at me with this like confused face, being like, Becky, I lost my job. We're down an income stream, and you're talking about buying more real estate. Now, my husband has always been the more conservative one, right? I am absolutely the risk taker. I am the one that kind of sees these visions and things in a different way that my husband sees. And he's always looking for the ground, stability, no risk whatsoever. So I'm not surprised by his response to me being like, let's go buy real estate. But that was actually when I decided to start Lady Landlords, because I knew I wasn't the only one out there knowing that corporate America is not there to take care of us, that there are other ways to be able to live lives, that women were looking for ways to create income streams that are outside of Tupperware parties. And I think that that was really important for me. And that was really kind of a turning point where instead of just, we'd owned a few rentals by that point in time, but we just kind of picked up things that were convenient. I feel like that was really the turning point where we were able to say, hey, like, we actually are sitting on our freedom, on our ability to live life in the way that we really want. And I feel like that, after many conversations with my husband to get him on board with this, and I had to show him a lot of calculations and a lot of spreadsheets and a lot of these numbers, and work through fear and work through his concerns about these things. I'll be honest, I didn't really kind of feel that fear. I was like, let's go, let's do this, let's try it. He was kind of the ground that was like, yeah, but how do we pay taxes? Or how are we funding these properties? Valid questions. But I feel like it was really at that point that I realized I did not need to replace every single dollar of my salary, but I needed to get to a place where I could replace enough of it to create choices. So for me, at that moment, we started building intentionally. Every property we bought from that point fit a plan, fit a strategy. And to be honest, it made buying so much easier. It didn't make my husband feel that we were taking risks, because we had a clearly laid out strategy and plan that he saw the vision. He understood every single property that we were buying fit what that outcome was going to be. And that I think got him on board a lot more, and then made me buying things so much easier, because I had a very clear buy box and a clear plan of what that looked like. And it allowed us to be able to kind of grow from that space. But a couple lessons that I kind of learned that way. First thing I gotta say is, like, the idea of, I'm gonna do my air quotes over here again, air quotes, freedom, I gotta say feels different than I expected, right? My goal was to get out of that like 9 to 5 and these like arbitrary rules. But now, for me, I will say that for me, that freedom is now changing my schedule. Once again, I don't have anybody that just arbitrarily said I need to be at a desk at 9 o'clock. I can say, like I did this morning, I took my daughter to the library and we read books and we sang songs. And it was fun. And that's how I wanted to start my day to day. And I'm so grateful that I was able to have that choice. I didn't check my computer. I didn't check my numbers. I didn't check my rents until now at, noon. And that's okay. It was choosing that schedule that really is kind of that freedom that I needed and that was important to me. Second thing I really learned is entrepreneurship is its own beast. And this is going to go with that whole idea of people that really think real estate investing is just passive. And for the 1000th and first time, I'm going to say that real estate investing is not passive. It takes work, okay? You are now the CEO of a business and you're responsible for all the pieces of it. Money just doesn't kind of show up in your mailbox. There are times that are more stressful than others. I have always said that I feel like that tenant turnover time seems to be the busiest part of where I have to be involved. When a tenant moves out, I always feel that's the riskiest. When a tenant moves out and has given their notice, they have no care. Nothing's binding them to that. And it's taken, to be honest, some of the best tenants I've had and kind of turned them into nightmares because they have nothing to lose when they're moving out in 20 days. They don't have to follow any rules. They know you're not going to come after them. Like, it's just a spot where all bets are kind of off. And then clearly, in order to continue the income stream that I want coming in, I got to find somebody. I got to do the work to flip the place. I got to do the screening. I got to find the right tenant. I got to mitigate my risk when I'm handing over the keys to somebody and getting that person in. That's a little bit more stressful. But to be honest, after that, when all your tenants are in and all your tenants are in place, things kind of run smoothly. And that's where, once again, I feel like I can kind of enjoy my day to day. And that's where the mailbox money, that's where that passive income feels like what that looks like. But there are things that then you have to deal with that pop up. We were going to bed the other night. Literally, I was about to turn that bedside lamp off when all of a sudden our phone went off. Now, my phone by this point is already on Do Not Disturb. So if it's going off, that is because I have my phone set up to allow for emergency calls from tenants to ring through. So the fact that that went off, I am not happy already with, okay? And we got pictures of this huge tree in the back of one of our yards, and it's row houses, which means that I have neighbors very close to me, and it's also with a set of a train line behind it. And I'm looking at this tree and I am like, oh my God. And part of this tree fell down. And that's something that now I have to take care of. I have to come up with a plan of what we are going to do at that point in time. And all I thought about was, this is what I get paid to do. This is all those other times that I get the freedom and that I get to plan what my day looks like, and that I could say, hey, I'm doing summer Fridays because I want to spend that time with my baby. I'm going to go on vacation. I'm going to go live in the Dominican Republic for 4 or 5 months a year because that's where my husband's family's from, and I want us to be present for that. I think of all those good things that I am able to do because now I have to get through this situation, and that's my job, problem solving for my tenants and dealing with my properties. That is a part of this puzzle, and that's a piece of entrepreneurship. I want to address that because, yes, I did not replace one 9-to-5 calendar for another 9-to-5, but I removed my boss. Decisions are now on me to make, and I need to run my business in that same way. But within that, once again, the biggest reward to growing a successful real estate portfolio, to me, is not the money. It's the flexibility. It's the purpose. It's the idea of being able to work for myself, to create something, to be able to choose what type of mom I would like to be, rather than having that dictated to me. It also gives my husband the freedom to decide how he wants to be a husband and a father. My husband also does not work a full-time traditional job. He's actually struggled when people, now that we moved into a new home, a new neighborhood, new city, all that, my husband actually struggles with when people ask him like what he does. And for a while it was really interesting because he was like, oh, I'm not working. Or he would give this answer of, oh, I used to kind of like work in IT, but now we moved and we had a baby. So I don't know, I got to figure out what's next. And I would just kind of like elbow him and like the ribs there and be like, be proud. You're a landlord. You're a real estate investor. Like, it was just so interesting for him to kind of make that mind shift that you don't need a 9-to-5. And all because so many other people are going that route doesn't mean that we have to too. So one of the biggest questions that I get asked is, if I could kind of do this all over again, would I do it? Would I leave corporate America and become a full-time real estate investor? And I got to say, my answer is yes, but it's really not for the reasons that people think. For me, it's about the options, the flexibility, the personal responsibility, the ownership. To me, it's not just let's escape a job and not get rid of a boss that doesn't like me or, get rid of arbitrary rules, but it's really to build something greater. I feel like when I go to bed at night, I put my head on that pillow and I get to say, yep, this is the life that I wanted. I built it, I designed it, and now I get to live it and reap the rewards of it because of the work that I put in. So here are a couple takeaways from you today. One, I want you to think about, how are you building options, making big decisions? I did not just go and say, woohoo, have a rental property, let me just go quit my day job right now. I grew that. I figured out what my freedom number was. And what I mean by that is, what number did I need coming in in order to replace my income. Like I said, it wasn't a dollar for dollar. I made a good living in cancer research. I made a good six-figure salary there. I didn't need that to live. I like to kind of live a pretty basic lifestyle. My husband and I are kind of minimalists. If you're ever invited to our household and I don't have an extra plate for you, you know why. But we live a very kind of simple, basic life. So I didn't necessarily need all those funds, but I did want to factor in what health insurance was going to look like. Once again, that's a big question I get is, what do I do for medical insurance? I pay for it, right? That is a large bill that I have to pay every single month, but it's okay because I worked that into my numbers. So although I was able to say I don't need the salary that I used to make, I also made sure that it wasn't just the salary that I needed to think about, but what are those benefits? I also set up my own retirement. I still have a 401k. I still have investments accounts that I am able to build for that retirement in that same sense. I still treat things in that same way. You need to figure out what that number is for you, though. My freedom number is going to be different than that freedom number, but your freedom number is not your income. You can also think about it in ways of, one, how much money do I need coming in to cover my daily expenses, to make sure that I am not getting behind on my bills, my mortgage, any of those things. What does that minimum number look like? That should be your first number. The second number you want to think about is, where can you then be to maintain the lifestyle that you have? Okay, so the first one, we're going to be kind of cutting out some of the frills. The second one is now kind of like maintaining where you are now. And then really the third number that I like to think about, and this is what then I wanted to grow to, is let's add in some frills. Let's add in that extra vacation. I live out of the country half the year. That was incredibly important to me. I still want to be able to take vacations. That is something I'm doing, this like dream vacation now here at the end of July. I am so excited for it. My husband and I are going to like 4 or 5 different cities. We're crossing through 2 different countries. We're taking our 9-month-old on the whole thing. That's going to be fun. Follow me on Instagram because I'm probably going to need advice about how to travel with such a small little baby. So we'll see how that goes. Those were things that now I'm saying, like, I still want to be able to do all those fun, exciting things. So what was the number that I needed to get to that was going to allow me to have those frills? And that was then where I was able to make those decisions. Where do I leave the day job? What do I do for retirement? Is my husband able to retire? And what that all comes back to is remembering what your why is. Why are we actually doing this? You do not have to just say like, oh, generational wealth. Oh, I want to leave things to my kids. No, we need to get more clear on that. Okay. What is the specific reason? I had an amazing childhood. My mother had a daycare at the house and raised us there. My mom was always the house that if you got off the school bus and your parents weren't there or your parents weren't home, you went to Marlene's house. And my mom was just that neighborhood mom. She was able to go on field trips. She was able to be the school class mom. She was able to really be present. And that was something that I really appreciated. She still worked. Like I said, my mom raised a daycare. We had like tons of kids at my house every single day. I'm already a middle child and now I'm competing with all these other kids. But I absolutely loved it because I got to be with my mom. And that was something that for me was personally important to be able to do for my daughter. And I wanted my husband to have the choice of what type of father he wanted to be. Did he want to go and work that 9 to 5 and just bring home the bacon for the family? Cool. Did he want to be there and be on the sidelines and be the soccer coach? He could do that. That's now within the wheelhouse, but that's my why. I want you to take 2 minutes at the end of this podcast here, pull out a piece of paper, pull out a note on your phone, and write down what your why is. Get specific. Think of that picture in your mind of what your ideal life would be. If you want to go a step further than that, put that little message and maybe even a picture on the background of your phone. Put that on your mirror in your bathroom so you look at it every day. You want to have that reminder of what that looks like. So right now, I personally am about to get ready to really take some time off, go recharge with my family now here as we're getting through the thick of summer here, and I'm going to take off some time. But it reminds me of exactly why I started this business in the first place. To me, you've heard me say, if you've listened to any of our other episodes, that my goal is really to make the most amount of cash flow with the least amount of properties. If you've listened to our podcast before, you have heard me say that my goal is to be able to create the most amount of cash flow with the least amount of properties. And still, 8 years later, I am still building my portfolio in the exact same way. Because to me, success is not about building the biggest portfolio. It's about building a life that you're excited to wake up to every single day. And if you're not, it's time to change it. Thank you very much for joining me for today's episode of the Lady Landlords podcast. Please do make sure to hit that subscribe button so you do not miss the next episode. We release new episodes every single Tuesday. Thanks for joining me again, and I will see you all next week.
Thank you for listening to the Lady Landlords podcast. If you're feeling stuck in your real estate investing journey, visit lady-landlords.com to book a 15-minute orientation call with me and see if you're ready to join our mentorship program. Or you can subscribe to our newsletter and join our Facebook group for exclusive real estate investing tips and offers. Invest with confidence. Become a Lady Landlord today.